All right, welcome back, friends and fiends. How you guys doing? We're jumping in. Talk a little bit about two new RPGs. Well, new to me, I suppose. They've been out for a little. Dolmenwood and Root. We're going to talk a little bit about these two, and wanted to kind of give my first impressions of them and kind of like them. I put these next to each other because they're in some ways very similar, and in other ways not similar at all. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. It was more interesting as I was going through and reading it that one of these changed my mind quite a bit about something, and one of them, and it's rude to say didn't, but was much more what I was expecting. I had a lot more in common with what I was expecting with that. So there's not too much preamble to get into it. So which one of these guys do we want to do first? You know what? Dolmenwood's on top. I guess we'll go with Dolmenwood. And we'll jump into that. So how are you guys doing? You guys doing all right? You guys doing well? Hopefully so. So, this is from Free RPG Day, and as this year's Free RPG Day, and like most things that are on Free RPG Day, you can generally find a copy of this, usually as a PDF afterwards, that you can download for free. So if you're interested in any of these, I know Root for sure is up there because I remember seeing Root when I was looking for something else on Drive-Thru RPG, so I know that one's up there for sure. I assume you can get the Dolmen one probably Exalted Press, so it's either going to be through the Exalted Press website, and it might be on Drive-Thru, but probably through that, or maybe itch.io. I'm not sure. You'll have to poke around for it. If not, I'm sure there are other means in which you can find it, which I don't think they're going to be unhappy about. It is supposed to be a free supplement after all, so hopefully you'll be able to find that very easily. Let's look over at this. Let's kick it off. So like I said, this is an Exalted funeral game, so let's take a look at what they had to say about Dolmenwood. So Dolmenwood, venture into the perilous fairy tale woods with this Dolmenwood RPG Quick-Start, featuring basic rules, 6 ready-to-play characters, and a short adventure. Weaver the Redcaps, right there on the cover. I'll be looking at the cover a little more. Trying to show you. And of course, it's pretty easy to find an image of it, and this image just any bigger. I assume not. Oh, it is. It is actually quite a bit bigger. There we go. All right. Well, and of course, if you guys have any questions while we go, just feel free to drop that in. We'll talk about it. But talk a little bit about what's in Dolmenwood. So, the things that are in Dolmenwood. So, one of the nice things that is right inside this interior cover is we have a beautiful map of a portion of Dolmenwood, not the entire thing, just a portion of it. One thing I will say is that I think it's something to do with maybe how the pre-pro for the printing was set up, but I don't know. Something about the colors just kind of seem a little muddy to me, so I don't know if that was something to do with the printers or something to do with the pre-pro for the printing process or layout for it. Yeah, something with it doesn't gel just right. It's surprisingly dark. I don't think that probably comes across super well in video, but it is a little bit darker than I'd like it to. So some of the details are a little bit washed out, and sort of since most of it goes into like a deep, dark, kind of spooky forest kind of situation. Spooky. We'll say wild forest. A really spooky game. Wild forest situations that it gets a little bit difficult to see kind of the details that are in there. But that's actually not too big of an issue because nothing in that map is important to this adventure. You don't need to see it all. We'll talk one other thought about the map that we'll talk about here in a second. But okay, let's talk about what I was expecting when I was picking this up at my friendly local game store on Free RPG Day, which, tell your clocks, it's going to be next year. It's in June usually, and I think always in June. So that's in the US and abroad. Apparently they had some issues with it this year, so I think it got delayed abroad, but it was on time here in the US and I think Canada. So I knew a little bit about Dolmenwood before going into it, primarily because the there is an official soundtrack for the Dolmenwood game, and that is made by Tales Under the Oak, which is a dungeon synth artist that I listened to before I knew anything about Dolmenwood. So it's very interesting to see them, and I was like, oh, it's one of my favorite things, kind of collaborating with this other thing. So I've listened to I'll just put it this way, I have listened to the soundtrack for Dolmenwood more than I've read through this thing, which is pretty much twice. But I've listened to that album multiple times, and I think there might be... Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. So, what do you need to know about Dolmenwood? Dolmenwood is very much an OSR game. That's an old school Renaissance or old school revival. So it focuses on early edition D&D is what the things that they're trying to ape and improve upon. An incredibly popular thing, the kind of trite saying now is that the OSR movement is now has taken up more amount of time than the thing that it is trying to reenact. Which you could say that about a lot of reenactments, I suppose. In living history things, is that most of that time, that stuff's been going on longer than the thing they're actually trying to mimic was going on. It has this folk fairy tale kind of setting that should tip you off since there's redcaps in the title. If you're not familiar with what redcaps are, they are kind of a gnomish, goblin-y kind of thing. If you play Baldur's Gate 3, you've run across them. They are fey denizens. They're like old, like Breton fairy tale kind of things. Primarily, they're called redcaps because they would dip their caps in people's bloods, and that's what makes them red. So they're very close to like Spriggans and things like that. So there are a lot of little funky, goblin-y, gremlin-y kind of creatures in folk tales, and this emulates some of that. And it does have a certain vibe to it, a certain feeling to it, which I appreciate. But you can see even in like layout, we'll show off the characters real quick. The layout, all things are done. You'll notice that every page is 2 columns, justified alignment, just in the same ways that is very, very old school. With I guess technically this is at least 2 color printing. Primarily it's just black and red, but we do have a few text sidebar text boxes that have some different background. So a little interesting, I would think. You're going to spend money to do that, but then they also have 4 color cover. The interior pages are primarily black and white with just sort of this nice reddish accent. So, very nice. It's got a very feel to it, so if you are familiar with anything else OSR, this is all going to be very familiar to it. So, when I read through it, those were kind of my expectations of reading through it. What did I get? And it's a fun fairy tale kind of thing. It's OSR, it's fairy tale. It's got a very decidedly British flavor to it, and that's flavor with a U in it, so you know it's British. But it's small but focused setting around the Dolmenwood, which is really nice. So it's not like this huge like Forgotten Realms kitchen sink kind of thing. It's relatively small, kind of focused around one particular forest for the most part, and it packs a lot of rich setting tone into a very, honestly, very small space. I think it's a single column text. Yeah. You know what? Let's just read it. How about that? I'll make it easier. I'm doing primarily talking and not looking at the front image right now. We'll just do this. All right, so let's do a little bit of reading. So here's the Dolmenwood lore. Sentient folk. While humans dominate the settled reaches of Dolmenwood, they are not the only folk to call the place home. You have Breggles, the Highwold region of southwestern Dolmenwood, which is the place that is shown on here. The Highwold, right there, has been ruled since ancient times by the goat-headed Breggles. Breggles are divided into 2 castes, distinguished by the length of their horns, aristocratic long horns, and commonplace short horns. Which is great because we do get a Breggle character in here. I just flipped away from them. There they are. And right there on the cover, that's our little goat person. They are obviously a short-horn variant, not a longhorn. You know, they are a commoner. In addition to Breggles, we have the Mosslings. The dank fungal-infested lowlands of Mulch Grove in the eastern woods, not on the map, are home to a shy and stunted folk called Mosslings, part mortal flesh and part plant or fungus. So if you imagine like halflings and myconids kind of lamb together, then that's pretty much what Mosslings are. They're very interesting though. So if you want to play somebody who's kind of like part plant or part fungus, but also part person, they're interesting. For our fairies and demi-fae, among the myriad peoples of the fairy, a number venture into Dolmenwood and mingle with mortal folk. Elves, otherworldly and beautiful, the little cat folk known as Grimalkins, and bat-faced woodgrews are the most commonly encountered. So we got a whole bunch of other like fairy tale kind of creatures that are also going to be in there. We don't have any of those kind of creatures. The only ones that we do have one elf that comes as a pre-gen. So we have a Mossling, a Breggle, and a elf that come as pre-gens, and those elves are going to be a lot more like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell kind of elves. They're very strange and kind of alien. They are not what we think of like Tolkien style elves. And other sentient beings. Off the beaten track, innumerable creatures await discovery. Goblin tricksters peddle fairy fruits and questionable wares. Scrabies emerge from their network of tunnels, eager to explore. Even a bird or animal may surprise travelers with two L's, that's how you know it's British, by greeting them from the wayside, spinning a riddle or cursing their trespass. So yeah, it definitely kind of gives you that idea very early on. Be like, look, even when you come across things that should be like benign and mundane, such as like squirrels and birds, it's like, you never know. You don't know what those creatures, they might hop out and try to start talking to you. Very interesting. There's also some factions and powers that we can talk about as well. Hey, what's going on? Possum Billy. Interesting coincidence, you were just at a game shop looking for Dolmenwood and Mouse Ritter. Didn't have either. But you picked up the Root Core book. Then this will be aimed right at you. Yeah, I feel like Mouse Ritter specifically is very difficult to find. Dolmenwood I think is a little bit easier, but they are newer and a smaller publisher. But yeah, Root's actually surprisingly easy to find, or at least it has always been for me. I think part of that comes because Root is based off of a board game, so they already have a pre-existing relationship probably with that brand for a lot of game shops, assuming that you go to a game shop that also sells board games. That, it makes sense that they would be like, oh, this is like another thing for the thing that we already carry. Let's talk a little bit about the factions and powers. This is all just one column of text, by the way. Let's quick start. The factions and powers. The Duchy of Brackenwold, sorry. Ruling from the supposedly impregnable castle Brackenwold, the dukes trace their line back to the earliest settlers in the region. All mortal folk within the old wood, from the humblest beggar to the highest lord, pay fealty to the duke. So there's a duke who's pretty much in charge of everything. The Pluralitarian Church, while holds much political clout, the monotheistic Pluralitarian Church is of late diminished in Dolmenwood. Many shrines and chapels dedicated to the 100 saints of the church have fallen into ruin and been reclaimed by the forest. So already you get like a nice chewy piece of narrative for if you're going to play. Two of the characters in here are members of the church. We have a cleric and a friar, which are different classes, and gives them reasons as to why they might be going into the Dolmenwood. They might be sent into the Dolmenwood looking for these chapels or shrines and trying to recover artifacts from them, like relics from them, or reestablishing them, or consecrating them, or whatever it may be. It gives you in a very little amount of time, gives them a lot of chew on to be like, okay, here's actually a lot of cool stuff we could do with this. And a lot of ways to kind of get a PC involved. We also have fairy nobles, where mortals now reign. Great fairy nobles once held court. The entirety of Dolmenwood was once the domain of a cruel elf lord known as the Gold Prince. Lord of Winter Eternal. Fearful tales of his return to Dolmenwood and his icy wrath weave a common thread through the folklore of those who dwell within the erstwhile domain. So we've got an amorphous potential big enemy that could be showing up. So always like that. And the last thing we have down here is the Nag Lord, a wicked trickster figure of local folklore said to keep unholy court in the twisted northern woods, where his armies of corrupted Breggles and other creatures of chaos lair. The Nag Lord is known in folktales as the King of the Wood, and is portrayed as being part man, part unicorn, with 9 legs. So very much leaning into the fairy tale thing where it's like, oh, well, it's a horse with 6, or in this case, 9 legs, and you go, well, that doesn't really make any sense if I think about it for 2 seconds. But definitely, as far as fairy tales and all sorts of strange creatures that end up like that, makes a lot of sense. So you've got a lot of people who are already altogether very interested in what goes on in Dolmenwood. One is a duke who lords over it for now. You have the Plurtine Church, who is trying to scratch back from the power they once were at. You have the fairy nobles, who are very interested in retaking it because they used to hold it, especially name the Ice Prince, Cold Prince, sorry. And the Nag Lord, which is sort of our chaos general antagonist that hangs out apparently in the north of the wood. So we get a lot of lore in a very short amount with Dolmenwood. So I really, really like that. And there's also, and that cool tone and writing also extends to the characters. Let me see if there's a character or two that we read. It's just like a short paragraph where you get a few for each of the pre-gens. You get like 3 sentences, 2 sentences. Let's do Brom Fraggleton. He's a human fighter. All these characters are level 1. Which in OSR means that they are quite frail, fragile. They do not have a lot of hit points. They will die very easily. Alright, you spent 10 years as a hermit in a cave, struggling over an old prayer book, before concluding that you didn't really believe in God. Returning to your family, you found your hamlet razed and took up the life of a wandering sellsword. So, age 40, height 5'10". Very interesting to also have a character be an atheist in a party, number 1, with two members of the Plurtine Church. And also the fact that those guys have spells. So they get spells from God, so how do you square that circle with being an atheist when you see actual power of potential God? Do you just say, well, that's not a God? Maybe that's how you come to grips with it. You're like, oh, that could be a demon or fae or anything wearing any number of skins or cloaks or facades to pretend to be a god, but is not actually that powerful. So, but you get a lot of really, really interesting ones with the. Let's see if there's another good one. Ooh, let's do Shadow of Sorrow's Lament. That's the character's name, by the way. They're an elf thief. They talked about elves being very, very strangely fae. Exiled from your native realm of fairy for betraying your liege, the enigmatic duke who cherishes dreams, that's the name of the duke, you wander the mortal world. You have discovered one pleasure in Dolmenwood, breaking mortals' hearts. And I think you're meant to interpret that however you want, whether that means you are very sort of lascivious or very carnal in that, or you're like, I just find ways to destroy the things that mortals care about. And that's the thing that really fills me with a lot of joy. So they are very strange creatures. And underage, it just says, hey, you're immortal. Don't worry about it. But they are only 5'7", so they kind of take into account that idea that elves are shorter in general than most humans. Humans, I think all the humans are taller. They are indeed. With the exception of the Mossling, Shadow of Sorrow's Lament is the shortest PC. So, just a note. So, talking about the map, why did we include this map when really only one thing that we talked about in the lore is actually on it, which is the High Wold? Yeah, it would have been nice to have a big map that shows like all of Dolmenwood, especially when we just mentioned so many other places. Like that would have been nice. And I suspect that they only put it in here because they needed something to fill up the rest of the front cover, or they needed something to fill up space, and they wanted to make use of the 4-color printing that they got for the cover. That's not really the same for the. No, you know what? This thing probably is 4 colors throughout because there's also blue in here on the maps of the adventure. You know what? It is probably 4-color. So that I'm not sure why they did that. It would have been nice to have it. I guess it's probably so big that it would be difficult to really see anything. Like I said, it's already difficult to pick up some of the colors and specifics in here. So I think if they had done the whole map instead of just a quarter of it, that probably would have been even less easy to figure out what was going on in it. But what about the game itself? How does Dolmenwood play? Well, Dolmenwood plays, its basic rules are dice rolls, character statistics, core game rules, which is ability checks, attacks, damage rolls, saving throws, skill checks. Tracking time is very important. It's very much on that front page. But it is, at its core, it's OSR. So if you have played an OSR game before, you are going to understand everything that's going to go on in Dolmenwood. We're talking, there's no core mechanic, which means sometimes you're rolling a d20, sometimes you're rolling a d6, and I didn't see one in here, but I think there's, if it's like other OSR things, there's probably times in which you're rolling a d100. There's no, you're always rolling d20 plus something to do whatever you're doing. There's lots of different stuff. There's no core mechanic. You've got low hit points, death at 0, non-ability linked saving throws, which include, your saving throws are Doom, Ray, Hold, Blast, and Spell. So as you'll notice, none of those are tied. Those bonuses you get from your class or your archetype, you do not get them from your ability scores or your... well, some of them, you do get some bonuses, depending on who you are, to some specific saves if you are playing a very specific ancestry. Or class. But I think it's from this class. Question? From your class. Yes. No. Unclear. I'm going to say it's probably from his ancestry. This is our fungus boy. And you get a bonus to saving throws versus fungal spores and poisons. That probably comes from them. As well as just a generic +2 to all your saving throws. Very powerful. You also have side-based initiative. That's very common. Some classes and ancestries are the only ones who are able to attempt certain things, so it's not a game in which everybody gets the ability to listen at doors, or everybody gets the ability to detect magic, or things on here. Decipher documents, climb walls, disable mechanisms, ledger domain, pick locks, stealth. Stealth is not a thing that just everybody gets the ability to do. Or alertness. So they have these things. Most of those are going to be d6 rolls. And those are very much dependent on your class for the most part. So I don't have the full rules, so I assume you might get some benefit from your ancestry as well. Maybe. I did find it a little confusing because it talks about this really early on about in the saving throws. Where is it? For saving throws against the effects of magical origin, add the character's wisdom modifier. I did find it confusing that on the actual character sheets, there's no mention of that. Be like, oh, by the way, like a little asterisk is like, hey, by the way, if there's something coming in from magical origin, you also get to add your wisdom to it. So that's not in there, which I thought was a little confusing. And there's stuff that's like that in other aspects of the character sheets. like the hunter's bonus to saving throws, which is the thing that I was just talking about, where you get a +4 and +2. Is that +2 to all saves already included or not? Unsure. Because I don't know how they don't have the class books. I don't know what the bonuses to their save targets are already, or what their save targets are based off of, so I can't really discern whether that's already included or not in the same way. Other things, like the friar has the herbalism trait. Each dose of herbs you administer treats 2 people, but they don't start with any herbs, and there's no herbs in the adventure for them to pick up. So there are a lot of things that's like that. Like, how does the mossling symbiotic flesh aspect work, where they have a tree that's growing out of them? Why is that even in there? It doesn't tell us that it does anything specific. So it's just, when we don't get the information about how some of these aspects work, I am in the favor, I think, specifically for something like a quick start, it's okay to just remove those superfluous kind of abilities. Like, if this is not going to come up in the pre-gens adventure, like, hey, we're not going to give you any herbs to use herbalism with, and there's not going to be any for you to find in the adventure. Let's just go ahead and cut that out. So people, what I want to avoid is people, let me rephrase that. So, if you are coming something like Dolmenwood with somebody who, like myself, who already has some OSR experience and that kind of thing, and plenty of experience just RPGs in general, when I see that and be like, oh, there wasn't anything I read in there about herbalism, this is something that is for the rest of the game. But if you're a new person who's the OSR, a new person running Dolmenwood, and you're just running the adventure in the back and you're just trying this out, I wouldn't want to create a quick start where you have these sort of ancillary things that are just kind of hanging on, those vestigial things that are not important to the actual adventure that you're going to run out of this quick start book. Because what I don't want to be like, oh, I have this herbalism thing, so I can heal somebody, and they'll be like, great, how's that work? I don't know. And then everybody stops and starts looking through the book and be like, there's nothing in here about how herbalism works. And now we've sidetracked the game for, 10, maybe 15 minutes or more, trying to figure out something that's actually not in the book. And then you go, oh, I don't know why this is on my character sheet then. So I want to avoid situations like that, so then people aren't searching through the booklet for stuff that's not there, and they get frustrated, or they feel like they're missing stuff in the game. Those kind of things are really, really difficult. So when you're doing a quick start, my personal opinion would be just cut that stuff out. If it's not going to be important here, just don't worry about it. We'll deal with it some other time. Just save it for the full book. Similar aspects like stalking, which is in the skills section back here. So stalking is a thing that the hunter gets to do, and the way that they explain stalking as, it's under the exploration rule, as the skill works the same as stealth, see below, but only functions in the wilds, i.e. not indoors. So you just get a separate style of stealth that's just not as good as stealth, because I can do stealth inside. Tracking is also like that, because tracking you have to do out in the wilderness. You cannot do it inside. And I understand the reasoning for that. Like, I understand that aspect, but you're also, presumably, this is an OSR game, so you're probably going to do quite a bit of dungeon delving. So it feels bad as being a hunter, which is their version of ranger, to not be able to use a lot of your key stuff in the most common adventure location environment. And also because stalking is something else. Stalking and stealth are not the same thing. If they were the same thing, they'd just be the same skill. But they're not. And when I think about like stalking and tracking, I can think of reasons why that could be useful in a dungeon that either I have used while playing or have adjudicated as running a game. You're like, oh, there's things like your ability to look at muddy footprints that are on the ground because somebody came in from outside, and be able to discern that and get some information out of that. Or this area thing has a bunch of dust that's been disturbed on it, and maybe I can use that information to understand what they were doing there, or stalking as far as like trying to follow somebody while hidden in a dungeon, which is not quite how stealth works, because you don't have like a quarry in stealth, and that's very much a stalking. So they're exactly what you expect. I mean, these archetypes and classes are, they're OSR. So they're going to feel very OSR. There's nothing here is super surprising, at least in this quick start for me. Once we get past the ancestries, I think the custom ancestries are very, very cool. But as far as like the classes and archetypes, yeah, they're all kind of bog standard. And you're either going to like this system where only some people have the ability to try to do some specific things like disable device or stalking or things like that. Or you're not going to like that. If you're primarily from a new D&D audience, that might be something that's really difficult for you to come up with, where you're like, oh, I used to be like everybody could stealth. It's like, no, actually only a few specific types of people can stealth. And nobody else really gets that opportunity to do it like that. So just kind of depends on how you feel about that. So maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I'll talk a little bit more about my overall feelings of OSR here as we continue forward. But you know, it is a decision point that you make with OSR, like a lot of OSRs. When do you care about death saves? Do you care about death at 0, or having characters that are really frail and can die very easily, and where you make one decision, you're done. So if that stuff appeals to you, do you like a lot of exploration-based things where you're counting things like dungeon turns and, you know, how long your light source will be lit for, that kind of stuff. That's all very OSR coded stuff. So it's a decision point whether you enjoy that style of play or you don't. Kind of a fork in the road for you. But one of the things I will say that I do like, and I am going to steal from here on out, is as a standard it has, if you are making a climb check and you fail the climb check, the fall damage is always calculated as half the overall height of whatever you're trying to climb. So if you're trying to climb a 100-foot cliffside, for example, and you fail the climb check, it always assumes you're falling from 50 feet up. I like that. I hate having to adjudicate climb checks and being like, right, I didn't think about like at what point up the cliff you would be when you fell, and I can be either really nice with that or really mean with that, instead of just being like, nope, it's always just going to be 50%, and that's just the go-to. That's something I like, and I'll probably take for my own DMing and GMing going forward, because I'm like, oh, that makes life so much easier. It's so much easier to just have an automatic thing to go to. Hey, how you doing, Hoyla? We are talking about, I'll go ahead and show it up on the screen. We're talking about Dolmenwood real quick. The quick start that's out. Here, in my hand, that's what I'm looking at. So yeah, it's OSR with a fairy tale flavor to it. I'm figuring out. Yeah, try figuring out fall damage and curves. Yeah, in some systems, just figuring out fall damage is a thing. Luckily, I think we've kind of gotten to the idea in the hobby that we've standardized a lot of it. Then you're trying to figure out, do I include my armor? Do I not include my armor if I have DR and stuff like that? So yeah, it's alright if you haven't heard about Dolmenwood. It's a relatively new game. Newish, I should say. It feels like I've been hearing about it for a long time, but I have one tiny toe in that OSR pool, so I hear a lot of people talk about it here and there. So, let me talk about some things that I dislike, or kind of one primary big thing that I dislike about this system, and it's going to be back here. I'm not really going to go back into the combat system. The combat system it's side-based initiative, very similar to any OSR, and with the ideas that you do is like, oh, you're going to roll the awareness, the surprise, the encounter distance, the initiative, the actions, and the conclusion. And once you go into the actual combat, you have a very clear procedure where you do declarations. The intent to cast a spell or retreat from melee must be declared. Then you roll initiative. So you have to declare if you're going to be casting a spell or moving out of combat before you roll initiative, before you know the spot you're going to be in. Then you roll initiative. One person from each side rolls. You roll a d6. Whoever rolls the highest that side gets to go first. The winning side acts. The actions of the combatants on the winning side are handled in the following sequence. They're able to move. And you have to do it in this order. You move. You do any missile attacks, cast any magic, you do any melee attacks, and then the other side goes. And it's always done in that order. And then at the end of the round, you'll check morale. You make a morale check for the monsters and NPCs, if applicable. So, having played and run a little bit of that before, I'm like, it's fine. Like, it makes combat go kind of quick. But you do have to make, it does make it hard for spellcasters, because right at the top of the round you have to figure out what you're going to do. You don't have to say what spell you're casting, I don't believe. You just have to say that you're intending to cast a spell, and if you're casting a spell you can't move. So that makes it a little bit easier. Like, oh, am I a wizard in melee? I'm going to spend my move getting out of melee. And I won't be able to cast a spell that round, but I could say, if I had a crossbow or something with me, shoot the crossbow. So you can do that stuff. There's also no, I don't think, if I remember correctly, there aren't any cantrips in here. There are no 0 level spells, so you get each, the casters gets 1 spell. That's what they get. I do like that all the holy spells are named after very specific saints, which is fun. You have the Breath of St. Lilibeth, St. Benester's Word, St. Fogarty's Benediction, and the Wisdom of St. Thorn. So, those are fun. I like those. But there's nothing special here. You're going to get healing spells, protection. You're going to get light, detect magic. So, like in this circumstance, light is a leveled spell. So you only get the one, you only get to cast it once a day, and after you cast it, you forget the spell. It's very fancy and old school kind of casting. But yeah, everything here is very similar. On the arcane side, you get Decipher, Ignite or Extinguish, Ion Shard is essentially magic missile. Actually a quite powerful magic missile. Rather than doing a d4, it does like a d6 plus 2 or something like that. Yeah, d6 plus 1. It was actually quite powerful. No, you don't get 3 darts. So, I guess that's the trade-off. But it does automatically hit, so you don't have to roll to hit, which is nice, and there's no spell save. One of the things that I dislike... Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to talk about. XP, experience points. I'll just read the section. After an adventure, the referee awards XP to the party based on the following factors. Treasure. The party gains 1 XP per 1 gold piece value of treasure recovered. Very OSR. Where gold is equal to XP. So, your primary purpose when you're doing things like dungeon delving or adventuring is to go get treasure and get it back to your safe haven, the town, whatever, and sell it off. So, that's what you're trying to do. And then you also get foes defeated. The party gains XP for every foe defeated, i.e. slain, outsmarted, captured, scared away, etc. The XP award for creatures is listed in its stat block. The primary means of getting... And I'm going to look at one of the stat blocks real quick just to see how much XP we're talking about for one of these guys. XP. Alright, that guy gives 35. This guy gives 15. So quite a bit of XP, but compared to, you're probably going to be finding 35 gold or more on any sort of adventure. So the primary means of getting experience is through gold. And that's a very different way about how OSR plays compared to how standard D&D today plays. Is that when you get most of your XP from gold, you spend most of your time, and the fights are super deadly, you spend a lot of your time trying not to get into fights. You do a lot of talking, you do a lot of bartering, you're doing a lot of sneaking around, you do a lot of magical shenanigans, other things, intimidation, you do that kind of stuff, alliances, you'll make that the Keep on the Borderlands is a very good example because you go into some caves that have a whole bunch of different factions of monsters in it, and one of the key ways that lots of groups deal with that is trying to get groups to ally with them against another group of monsters that's in there, which is very easy to do because the monsters don't really like it themselves. In the what are they, caves of chaos, right? Caves of chaos, I think that's what it's called. And Keep of the Borderlands adventure. So that's very, very common. So you see a lot about that. And if you are going to fight, you try to set up an ambush and you try to kill monsters very, very quickly, because getting reduced to 0 hit points, especially when you only have a few hit points, means death. But the important thing about the XP is that down at the bottom it says dividing party XP. All XP awarded to the party is divided evenly between all party members who survived the adventure. That's generally the part where I take issue with. Not the divided part. Like, that's fine. I'm fine with the dividing part. It's who gets a division. So let me give you an example. Say the party defeats a dragon, and they get its huge hoard of gold. And on the way out, everyone but say the thief that's in the back falls into a spike pit trap and dies. Because, you know, they just fought a dragon, so they weren't at good health and whatever. They fall in there. So, by these mechanics, why would the thief then get an entire dragon's hoard of gold as their experience? Because it's only for people who survived the adventure. So, think about that for a second. And how that might have some people play their game. If you're like, we're assuming in that example that the thief didn't know the trap was there, or forgot the trap was there. But maybe not. When you're like, oh, I could let this thing that kill my already hurt companions, and maybe I'd get like 5 levels out of that. That would be pretty sweet. So it does for me create this sort of like friction of play that's very different that I don't like a ton. I don't think it works within the fiction being like, oh, if a PC dies in the course of the adventure, that you lose the, wait for it, experience they accumulated during the adventure. Like, I feel like if any PCs that die in the course of the adventure should also have a fair share of that experience, because the party only got through it because of their experience and the sacrifice of their life through that. So they don't lose the money. You still get the money. You just don't get the experience for it. So it's just at the end, you'd be like, okay, so 10 of us set out and 5 of us came back, but we still only get 1/10 of the treasure because everybody would have gotten an equal slice of that treasure. It's futzy. I'm not sure that I love that as an example, but there is something about, like, I don't like the idea that it could instill the sense of play as like, maybe stab your friends once you get a whole bunch of loot, because it's kind of in your favor to do that. And not a lot of guardrails except the GM being like, don't do that. That's going to keep you from doing that in the game. There's no special death. Nope, you hit 0, you die. That's how it works. There's no special death mechanics. How is the thief carrying an entire hoard of treasure? Well, they can always go hire people, and they don't have to give those people XP. They can always go grab some people to come back and carry it out. Get some porters, some hirelings to come grab it. So that part's very easy. They can carry enough with them to go hire the people to get the rest of it out. That's not going to be an issue. Besides time, but you don't have any pressing matters because all the people who had pressing matters in your group are dead now. But you probably also want those magic items that they have on them, so you're probably going to figure out how to get those back out of the trap as well. Which, being the thief who can climb and disable mechanisms, you can do. that won't be as big of a problem as it is for other people. So I do think that that is a potential issue. And I will be honest, there's a reason why I think this way. And that's because I have some personal experience in a very similar realm playing, not this, but a different OSR game. I was playing OSE, so Old School Essentials. I was playing in a West Marches style of game where lots of people are coming together. Like generally I'd play on 1 or 2 nights during the week, and I'd have like a general crew of people that we would generally run with the odd person coming in or out. And we had this one guy in our group who would play a fighter. And he would be the first to grab any of the treasure, and he would not do the fighter thing. He would not actually do fighting. He would hang out in the back, run away from stuff, and shoot stuff with a bow. So I got to do a very cool session where I've been playing this thief, I don't know, like 4 sessions now. And it's like, oh, well, there's this thing, and like, all right, there's a tower, and it's like, we can fight our way through all the floors of this tower, or I can just try to climb the tower to the top and see if there's any treasure up there. So I make climb checks, I get up there, there's some monsters in there, I do a hide check, that goes well. They, bugger off back down the other ways in the tower. I'm like, great, there's this chest of gold and stuff. I tie it up with a rope, and we have a block and tackle with us, so we figure out how to attach it and winch it down from the window of this tower, do all the stuff and get it, and get the party a whole bunch of gold, and everybody's high fives all around. Then later on in the adventure, we are going down to a different location. We go down into a hole, which again requires a lot of the thief doing climbing checks because that's the thief thing, and that all goes well. It get them down there. Then we get attacked by some creatures, and everybody's yelling at the fighter to like get up in the front to defend the party, and they just refuse to do it as a player. And so I end up losing that PC. And it's not like that was the first PC I'd even lost in that West Marches game. I think it was like the 3rd or 4th at that point. But after that time, I realized that West March style gameplay can be really good. And it's not like I didn't have fun with it. But because you lack that cohesive group, that social contract aspect of a TTRPG is very tenuous. It's very muted. So it's really, really easy for one person to just kind of turn around and fuck over another person or an entire party in that game when you only deal with them once every like 4 game sessions. So it might be, a month and a half before you play with that person again. And then they have a new character, and then now they have to be like, that new character has to be like, well, I hate your character. Why? Your character doesn't know anything about what my character did in character. Like, that's very frustrating. So I ended up, as you might expect, leaving that group because of that. I was like, I'm not gonna deal with this guy. This was unfortunately a person in the West Marches campaign who was probably the most active member in it, and was running. All of us were running multiple PCs, but I think he was running like 6. And so he was playing more than anybody else. He was playing a lot during the week, many sessions during every week. And it was like, it was so rare that I would show up to a session that he wouldn't be in, and knowing he was going to be in there, I'd be like, I don't want to play with that guy. So I was like, well, this really isn't worth me logging in to see if that guy's going to be playing with us, and if he is, then logging out. I was like, I've got enough D&D games or TTRPGs. I can play other stuff. I don't need to be in this group. I would later learn that I was not obviously the only person with that sentiment. This was also a part of a bad game master who was not doing anything to kind of help enforce that social contract aspect of the game. And this is one of the things sometimes I talk about with game masters, because we're playing with a game master who's like, oh, I've been playing D&D since 74, yada, yada, yada. Play with multiples of these kinds of people. Is if somebody tells you that they've been running games since the 70s, just because they've run a lot of games doesn't mean that they run games well. And they certainly doesn't mean they run games well for the style of play that you want. And that is something that I found. Now when I hear somebody say, oh, well, it's fine, I've been running games, I'm I'm a game master. I've been running games for 20 years. That's become like a red flag thing for me. Where I'm like, oh, because I'm a person who's been running games for roughly 20 years. And I'm like, I don't, when I start a conversation with somebody, be like, oh, yeah, IGM, I've been doing it for 20 years. As if that's some sort of laurel. It's like, no, I've run a lot of games. Yeah. But games are very different. Styles are very different. I think people who say things like that, it's an insight into their character. That usually tells me, oh, I probably don't want to play with this person. And the people who say that definitely, generally, in my experience, don't tend to be very good GMs or dungeon masters. Yeah, it's not fun. But that is the thing that makes me think about things like, well, maybe the dead characters should at least, because we don't know how they're going to die, if they died because somebody didn't do their job, or whatever, or just dumb luck, or because the thief was trying to disable the trap and it sprung on them and it killed them. Like, but it's now sprung, so nobody else has to deal with it. I feel like they should get their fair slice of the pie, because I think that at least would be like, look, I'm not going to get the XP either way. I should at least try to keep the people in my group alive, rather than kill them off so I can have the levels. West Marches. We were playing Powered by the Apocalypse Engine. We were playing Dungeon World previously. And then ended up, he got tired with it and decided to switch over then. And we're like, okay, we're in the middle of a campaign, but sure. That everybody's kind of having fun with. But I guess you're the one running, so you get to make that decision. So there was writing certainly on the wall at that aspect to be like, I should probably get out of here at some point. Let's talk a little bit about the adventure. The adventure thing about the adventure is that the adventure is really simple. It is a house in a tree. You are supposed to be meeting with the person who is supposed to be in that tree. Oh, audio cut out. Oh no. Hopefully it's back now. Looks like it's back for me, at least. It's alright. I'm sure I wasn't saying anything important. So about the adventure, you got Redcaps. You've got some other things that are going on there. The Filth Croup. Or sorry, not Filth. Filch Croup. Which are a type of bird. You got that. You've got a little old lady who's the Weaver that you're trying to meet up with. She's in the treehouse. That's the thing. Like I said, I don't want to spoil too much about the adventure, and it's a really simple adventure. So me saying a lot about it is really gonna tell you a whole bunch about the adventure. So if you're interested in playing it or running it, I kind of want to say that, especially if you're thinking about having your game master or dungeon master or whoever run it. Yeah, I don't really want to spoil it. All you need to know is there's a house in the, well, I mean, look at the cover. The cover's pretty much going to tell you everything. There's a house up in a tree, and you are trying to get to somebody who's in that house, because you have, I think, has invited you to tea, I believe is the adventure hook, and with the prospect of a potential mission that they want to send you on, or adventure they want to send you on. But there are plenty of strange creatures to mess with. There are multiple ways to deal with this adventure. So this fairy tale adventure. So if you want to do nothing but combat, you can do nothing but combat. You can sneak around. You could talk to people. There are ways that this adventure will handle all of that. That's a nice part about writing a very simple adventure, is that when you involve a very simple adventure, it means you can add a lot of different ways for that adventure to be overcome with. So that is really nice. That's what I like about it, because the adventure itself is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, pretty much. And that includes the stat blocks and everything in it. You got a number of rooms. Each of the rooms has some very interesting things to mess around with. Some of them are obstacles, some of them are creatures, some of them are trinkets and loot and all sorts of fun stuff that you can get in here. And there's one particularly fun, very strange obstacle that I like. Uh, it's nice because the setup for it is you find out that one of the other creatures has been dealing with it, and so that's your clue right at the beginning of it, and you'll be like, why? They have a piece of gear that they have taken off, and they're like, why is their thing just sitting here? What's that about? Why is this tiny thing here? Piece of clothing here? And you go, oh, that's weird. And then you find out why. Once you get into the obstacle, why they did that. So it's full, but it's very simple. And yeah, I think at this point, I don't really want to tell you too much about it. There's cool things. I will, you know what? I'll spill one little thing in here. A little piece of loot that I like. How about that? Where is this thing? No, not that. Ah, here it is. The Hardy Companion Cloak. A normal-looking woolen cloak with a brass clasp in the form of a merry face. If the clasp is fed one ration of food and a sip of alcohol in the evening, the cloak produces a hearty warmth for the wearer throughout the night. Weather conditions and lack of fire or camping equipment do not prevent the wearer from getting a good night's rest. I'm like, oh, that's a very simple, very, very silly item. But it kind of gives you a tone for what's going on in this adventure. And be like, oh, that's a very neat thing. And it's very thematic as to the Weaver, which is the first part of the adventure, right? It's the Weaver and the Redcaps, so it tells you a little bit about the Weaver. So, summation, overall thoughts of Dolmenwood and this quick start and the Weaver and the Redcaps adventure. So, what it's really going to come down to is like, do you like OSR stuff? Do you like old school, Renaissance, revival, whatever you want to call it? And do you like OS fairy tales, old school fairy tales, as in things that are kind of dark, kind of creepy, kind of bad things happen to children a lot, primarily? If so, Dolmenwoods might be your new favorite thing. That's very interesting. Go give it a check out. I like the art in it. It's got this very simple, very OSR line art kind of feel for most of it that's really fun. And the characters we get in this, we get Bertha Candleswick, who's a human cleric. Rom Fraggleton, who's a human fighter. Brother Gillum Dunwaller, who's a human friar. And Merrild Boxstump, who is our Breggle magician, that's the goat people. Shadows of Sorrow's Lament, which is our elf thief. And Squib Odd Polyp, who is our mossling hunter, who also has with them Nobbler, their tiny, like, pygmy pig animal companion. What are we doing here? Nobbler, a merryman, a miniature golden swine with curly tusks and twisty tail. Follows you everywhere and obeys your basic commands, never checks morale if defending you. So you get a companion that doesn't have a morale check, which is really nice. Do I plan to run the adventure? Right now, I'm in the middle of a campaign, and I'm already running a different one-shot tomorrow because we have somebody out. So I'm running a different one-shot, but down the line, maybe. Certainly OSR is very fun to run. It's very easy to run for the most part. So that aspect of it I like because I'm familiar enough with it that the system's not going to give me a lot of hurdles. So if you're familiar with OSR, it's kind of a no-brainer to jump in and do. In general, I think I'm personally ambivalent about OSR. There's stuff that I like about OSR. There's stuff I don't like about OSR. And on paper, Dolmenwood's not really going to change that opinion for me. Now, if I ran it and played it, maybe I'd love it and maybe I'd change my mind. But since it's so close to most other OSR systems, I highly doubt that that is the case. There's plenty I love about old school D&D. I like its exploration-based gameplay, this idea that combat's generally a last resort, or it's something that you run at to when you have as many advantages as you can, and you run away from often. Where oftentimes combat is incredibly high risk. It can be high reward, but also can avoiding combat whenever possible also be high reward. So I like that. I like a lot of stuff about OSR, but I also think there's a lot of positive game evolution that's happened, in the past 40 years of gaming. in the hobby. And because I don't have any personal nostalgia for the OSR, now, did I start playing in sort of what we would call the OSR? Kind of. I'm like really way at the end of it. But still before 3rd edition. So there's stuff about that that is thoughtful to me as far as like, oh, I remember making maps and having that kind of stuff. Have fun and running and trolling through dungeons and have that kind of aspect of it. But I was also so young that I wasn't way into the hobby. And I also probably wasn't playing like half of it right. And that's pretty conservative guess. I was probably playing it about 75% wrong. Because if you've ever looked at old D&D rules, they're not exactly known for being easy to read and easy to teach you how to play the game. They're kind of known for the opposite of that. So I think personally, I'm more likely to play Dolmenwood only by the virtue of its setting and less by its rules. Which means that I'm actually probably more likely to take the little old setting of Dolmenwood and take my Breggles and Mosslings and strange elves from Fairy and probably port it over to a system that I like running and playing better. Whether that be 5e or something else. So I think that's kind of my overall feelings about Dolmenwood. Like, I would be interested in picking up the book specifically for the setting, less so for playing OSR. Again, because there's so many OSR clones out there. And this doesn't seem to be doing a ton different there. Now, at least that I can see on the surface. But again, not an OSR expert. But I have looked at multiple systems and played multiple systems. And nothing jumped out to me at being particularly different or out of left field or doing something exciting or different with that formula. Doesn't mean that not, it just means that I can't see it. Either because it's not in the quick start or because I haven't played enough OSR that I'm not that close to it that I can tell small differences between things. So, maybe this sounds good, but maybe it's not quite right for you. So what are some maybe alternatives? Well, there are a ton of OSR games around. You can kind of throw a rock and you'll hit one. So it's hard to come up with a recommendation because they're all kind of trying to do the same thing most of the time. Do I have some personal ones that I like? Yes, I like Lamentations of the Flame Princess. OSE was fine. I played it quite a bit. OC's fun. I think it's Black Hack. And then again, if you like things like Morkborg, which are also very OSR adjacent, with some different stuff going on, but OSR adjacent, Morkborg is good, and the Borg universe, if you want to do Cyber or Pirates, if you watch us do Dark Tides on the channel, you'll see me do their like little tiny wave crawl, which is a solo hex crawl, but using a ship, which is based off of the old Dark Fort, which was the solo game that they put out before they made Morkborg, which I've also played and run and enjoy quite a bit. I think probably more than Morkborg. Maybe one of these days I'll talk about my feelings about Morkborg, but that will not be today. Other things, if you want that similar fantasy fairy tale kind of feelings, there's Wanderhome, Obojima, which we've looked at the Obojima Quick-Start before. I don't need to pull that back out. Into the Odd, Mythic Bastionland. There are lots of RPGs about kind of specific fantasy settings. If you want to go into things like Oz or Neverland or Alice in Wonderland, like all of those have multiple RPGs dedicated to them that you can find something like that. And then another one that if you're looking for some whimsy that is a slightly different flavor would be Root. Why I put these together. They're alike, and yet very different. So, next up, we're going to talk about Root. Before we do that, I'm going to refill my coffee. You guys hang out, and I'll be back here in just a few minutes after I get a new cup of coffee. All right? All right, I have returned with coffee in hand. Hot, it's hot. Pour over coffee. Hot, 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 hot. All right. So now I said that one of these had changed my mind about stuff. And I think I spent enough time in Dolmenwood saying that, unfortunately, not a lot of it changed my mind about OSR stuff. Maybe. I like the setting. I want to do more stuff with that. Investigate that more, but OSR is OSR, and there's only so many flavors of vanilla that I'm interested in tasting. Which, by matter of deduction, and I know you are smart boys and girls and others, root was probably the thing that changed my mind. Let's talk a little bit about root. Let's read the actual. So, root's put out by Magpie Games, published by them. So they had a bunch of stuff. So we don't need really this first part where they're talking about. They also are the publishers behind the Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG, which I have one of the quick starts for. I think I picked it up maybe last year, maybe the year before. So this last part's about root. Carve your path through the war-torn woodlands, unique clearings, perfect for jumping into unforgettable RPG action fast. Honestly, I'll be real honest, it does not do a very good job describing what root's about. Not really in the slightest. But so one of the things that I do want to shout out, specifically Magpie for, is they put out a lot of stuff for Free RPG Day. They have most of these publishers put out like one thing. Some of them put out maybe 2, maybe 3. They put out 8 for this one. Though I don't think any of these, I don't think this was brand new. I think this was out last year as well. But same thing, we talked about it earlier. If you're interested in, and you might wonder, like, why are there 3 quick starts? I should probably say that. Why are there 3 quick starts for roots? Each one has a different glade, which is what it says at the top. Pelnicky Glade Quick Start here. Why don't I show you the whole thing looks like? There we go. Pelnicky Glade Quick Start. So there are different glades that you can pick up. So Pelnicky just happens to be the one that I picked up, which is incredibly funny if you know anything about this. If you know anything about the glade or have watched my solo RPG series, you will be very... you'll be like, wait, why is one of the things in your solo RPG things mentioned in root? Yeah, it is. That caught me by surprise as I was reading through. I was like, oh, I know that. What is that booklet? The core I got is a little hardback. Yeah, this is the quick start. So Free RPG Day is a thing that is an annual event for friendly local game stores that you can go in and get, like Free Comic Book Day. You can get free TTRPG stuff. You can get actually a whole bunch of stuff. Both of these things are from Free RPG Day. So you don't technically have to pay any money for it. You can come in and get little like quick starts that kind of give you the basic rules for a lot of different TTRPGs, and sometimes they're adventures, sometimes they're quick starts and adventures. So like All Bets Are Off, which I talked about last week, doesn't really tell you how to play the game. In fact, they on the inside give you a little QR code for downloading the quick start rules. So this is all just an adventure. Very modern 5e style game. But oftentimes it is a quick start. So the basic rules of how to play the game, plus a little adventure that shows you, now that you know the rules of the game, here's how you can implement the rules of the game, so you can learn how to play them. So, that's a little bit about Root. That's a little bit about Free RPG Day. It usually happens in June. So mark your calendars. You can go to freerpgday.com, which was the website we were just looking at. That's what this website is. Up there. So, it was on June 27th this year. I picked up a number of things. If you have a friendly local game store, I suggest checking it out. You can also go to the website and they can tell you whether your game store near you is participating or not. And down here, you can get all the publishers and you can get a sneak peek at stuff they put in there. Like we have Wizard Riders, which is another one we looked at. Ninth Level Games put out the Anthology, which I usually pick up, and I did this year, but I have not talked about this one yet. The anthologies are really great if you want a lot of like short, like one-page style RPGs. They're really great. They fill out those things, and they're all weird and different and interesting. So highly recommend, as I do with anything that's free RPG Day. Anything that gives you a nice, easy way to get into the hobby if you're not already into the hobby, or if you only play D&D, try to get a look at some other stuff without feeling like you have to do a big investment in like going out and buying a $60 world. It's a real nice, easy way. And, you know, if you're in your friendly local game store, maybe buy some dice or something while you're in there to help support your local business. But let me talk about like what I was expecting from it and why did I pick this up. So I hadn't really planned to pick it up. I did in my preview when I was talking about things that were there and trying to figure out what I might want to pick up, because usually you can't get everything while you're in there because you don't want to be that guy. And usually they put a hard limit. Most places will put a hard limit on you, unless they just don't have people show up. So this was kind of, the root one was kind of middling down on my list. I was like, yeah, I know the board game, the progenitor of this, the board game. So I was familiar with that. And so I kind of had an idea about what Root's about based off of the board game. So it's like, but I'm also not like cutie aesthetic. Board game conversions to RPGs generally don't have a great track record for being super good. And then it's also a PBTA game, which is powered by the Apocalypse Engine game, the like dungeon roll game. Which I have kind of, well, I talked about it earlier, about the campaign I played in, where we swapped over to playing OSE. And it swapped over like we were playing the same campaign. We stopped that campaign and started playing another campaign. It was also weird because you had somebody who was running a Powered by the Apocalypse style game, but was trying to run it like a D&D game, like they weren't super familiar with the system. You're like, the things you're trying to do here the game doesn't really work like that. It'd be like trying to take D&D and then trying to play like a super, like D&D 5e, and then trying to play like a super social focused game and be like, you could, but the game really doesn't have a lot of stuff that supports that. You should really be playing something that's got a system that's a lot closer to maybe something like Vampire the Masquerade, where you have a whole bunch of like social role stuff and out of combat stuff you can do. Different styles of games, different systems work better for that. So I hadn't really planned to pick it up because it was kind of, but I did pick it up. I did end up picking it up, which came for a couple of reasons. One, because my partner saw it and they were like, oh, cute animals. And I was like, yeah, they have cute animals on it. The same reason I picked up Dungeons and Kittens, right? That was also one I was not expecting to pick up and was pleasantly surprised by. There's a playlist. You can go see everything we've talked about thus far if you want to check that out. But mainly because when I was talking to the person at the FLGS, my friendly local game store, and they were like, oh, far and away our most popular thing that we're giving out today are these Root Quick Starts. We are almost out of them. And when I say they were almost out of them, you have to understand that they didn't get like a box with stuff in it. They got like boxes of stuff in it. So I mean, like some of these quick start guides, like Dolmenwood, you had like stacks up to here, where you had like dozens of them that were out. And these guys, and remember that there's 3 of these for every one of these, were almost gone. Like all of them, not just the Pelnicki Glade, like all of them were almost gone. Jeez. Like, all right, well, I'm nothing if not a blind follower. I'm also gonna pick this up. I also need to pick it up and see. I would hate to miss out on something good. Maybe there's something in here that I don't know about. And also, it's got cute animals on it. They're adorable. I like woodland creatures. It's fine. So I'm like, I guess I'll pick it up. I got no reason not to at this point. Like I said, most free RPG Day events you'll go to, nowadays, most game stores do it 2 ways. And I think maybe this is a change in the approach through Free RPG Day. I'm not sure. One is that you can only get stuff if you agree to play in the adventure, and then you get the thing to take home with you. Which I don't necessarily want to do, because I want to read the stuff. I don't necessarily want to... I wasn't planning to sit down at my game store for like 8 hours. I wasn't planning to waste the day, all day at the game store. That's not really something I was prepared to do at the drop of a hat. Which was the case in one of the game stores I went to. The other ones are usually like, oh, you can get like maybe 2 or 3 things, but if you want more things, you need to make a purchase, or you get, if you make a purchase, you get so many more things go with you, whatever. There's no hard-coded way to do it. And so that's why I picked up like Dark Tides. That was one of the things I picked up. Here's a little tip for you if you are somebody who happens to work at or run a game store. I don't even know where I put it. We'll use this. Come here. This is for Lamentation, Flame Princess, but it does the same thing. Is that invest in zines. These guys. It's really hard to get somebody in who's going to want to buy a full $60 for RPG book. That's a hard sell most of the time. People don't make that purchase very often. One of the reasons why games like Magic and Pokemon are so successful is because it's really easy to drop like $5. I mean, they've gone up now, but it used to be like $5 on a pack of cards. Like, yeah, that's walking around money. So at my friendly local game store, they started carrying zines. So, you know, roughly this size, usually not even settle bound. I think, yeah, like staple bound, super simple, like generally no color, just black and white printing things. And they sell them for like $10, maybe 15, maybe 20, depending on what it is. But in general, about $10 to $15. This, if it's something that catches my eye, kind of hard to pass up at like $10 in a game store. And so there's an entire section in my local game store that's dedicated to this. And you know what? I spend a lot of time perusing it every time I go in. There's usually something new or different in it. There's usually something I'm like, I don't know what this is. Could be interesting. But for $10, if I get a few hours of entertainment out of it, or I get something that I can translate over into D&D or something else I'm running, that's totally worth it. As it was with Dark Tides. So Dark Tides was $10. I picked it up. You guys may have watched me play it on stream. And, you know, we played it for, what, like 3 hours? And I can go back to it and play it again. It's got a lot of replayability. It's a little solo game. In fact, it's one of the reasons I bought hex paper, so I wouldn't have to do it on the computer. So I could do it. And I didn't have to print out hex paper every time I wanted to do that. That's fun. So, yeah. Tip. Do more of these in your game store. You will find that you'll get more purchases. And they're a lower barrier to entry, which is very nice. So, that was kind of my issue. And like I said, I knew about this guy going in. Because I knew about the board game previously. And because I knew about the board game, I knew that this root has a particularly political bent to it. And you guys have watched the solo RPG. I obviously like politically motivated games. River Park is incredibly politically motivated. It's all about nobility. So, that's like, well, I mean, it's hard. It's free, right? I can't argue with that too much. There's no reason. I'd rather have it and not like it and give it to one of my friends and be like, this was not for me. Here you go. Than not pick it up and always kind of wonder about it. And like I said, each one of these, there's 3 of them, free on Drive-Thru RPG right now. You can go get the PDFs of them and play them today if you want. Figure it out. The game's pretty easy to get a handle on. So, what did I get? What actually comes in this old booklet? And I mean, number one, it's really well produced. The layout is so good in this book. Like, everything just feels like it just works. Everything's just right in place. You got plenty of beautiful little cute woodland creature art. None of which anybody doing any actual violence to each other, which is very funny. The closest thing is you get here was somebody committing a little bit of light arson. But not only is that. So, yeah, I mean, it's very straightforward. There's not a lot going on as far as art, but it's all very well laid out. The typography is really great. Unlike what we saw before, they definitely rag. They have rag alignment rather than justified. this is just weird typography stuff that you don't need to know about, but I'm like, oh, that's nice. I like that. And you got these cool character sheets. The only thing bad I'd say about the character sheets is that they are one character per each side of a page. So you can't just tear it out and hand it to somebody if somebody's playing the other side of that character. You probably need to make copies of it. Unlike other character sheets where, though Dolmenwood was very similar, where you had multiple characters on one page, you will probably need to make some sort of copy or get the digital version to use their character sheet. But, you know, that's easy enough. It's free. So, you might ask, why did I choose the Pelnicki Glade one? There's 3 to choose from. I pretty much chose this one because I like saying Pelnicki. It's very fun. Pellenicky. Pelnicki. It's fun to say. Pelnicki Glade. And very much kind of fits the theme. A very, very cutesy, rural, rustic kind of woodland. Got a kind of a Frog and Toad kind of feel to it, but if Frog and Toad were in Game of Thrones. And not just bumbling country folk, for the most part. So, yeah. Things I like about it. Inside the cover, great use of space. You have the quick reference for the moves. The inside cover. Super useful. Those will be the things that you're going to look at the most. So, very nice to have those on the cover. That's also a nice thicker cardstock. Unfortunately, I don't think this is one of the ones where you can just rip the middle out of it. I don't think that's going to go well. Yeah, it's fully stapled through. So unlike this one I had where the front cover just actually slipped off of it, because this is... Similarly, the interior is the dungeon map. So it could have done that, didn't do that. That's fine though. And it kind of would have been a pain in the butt. But I love the utility of space really much. It is a Powered by the Apocalypse engine, so if you've played Dungeon World or Masks or something else that's very close. Oh, we played Legend and Mist. We did that solo play comic on the channel a few weeks ago, so if you wanted to check that out and see how that plays, you can watch me learn those rules in real time while I'm trying to play through the comic and screw it up a few times while I do that. And nearly get my mother killed. But just able to sneak out of it with a success. But the system is very simple. You roll 2d6. 2 through 6 is a failure. 7 through 9 is success at a cost. And if you roll a 10 or higher, you get a complete success with no bad things happening. And I'd very much say that the vibe for Root is Redwall meets Game of Thrones. That's pretty much it. They're woodland clearings, they're woodland critters, but they are embroiled in a very, very large sort of like national movement. There's an invading army. There's potentially some resistance / revolutionaries that are happening. There is... Oh, waiting for me to see how I pronounce it. I'm about to pronounce it right now. Airy. Because it's related to birds, so I'm going to say airy. Even though I would probably have used the AE spelling and not the EY spelling of airy. But yeah, I would say airy. And that's... we can talk a little bit about the factions. Have it up. Where are factions out there? The Airy dynasties, the Marquisate, named for the Marquis de Cat. It's a cat who's a marquis. Also very chuffed that when we use the correct term, like a marquis, or the person who would be invading because they're on the borders of the empire they're already in, because a marquis is a marcher lord or a margrave, which means they're like a baron, but they're usually more powerful and they have larger holdings and they're more trusted by whoever the ruling person is because they hold the boundary of that state. That's a lot of inside baseball for world building, but I'm always chuffed anytime that I see stuff like that. And you have the Woodland Alliance, which are kind of like the rebel revolutionary aspects of them. That's kind of going on the underground because what happened is the Airy dynasties kind of fell into infighting and a civil war. leaving a whole bunch of people to kind of govern themselves, and now the area's recovered from their civil war, and they're solidifying their claim over the Woodland, and there are other people who have different ideas about who should be in charge of places. And that is pretty much the setup for Root, as you are a person who lives in that world. It's also worth noting that right up top that Root does not, as far as I can tell, and again, I only have the quick start guide, so if it's in the core book, I don't know about it, but none of the characters in here do it. And so that makes me think, and it's not mentioned anywhere in here, so I'm thinking that nowhere in the game does do this. There's no magic. You're playing a fantasy game as woodland creatures, but there's not any magic. It's a fully martial kind of game. So, I would be embarrassed to tell you how long it took me to realize there was no magic in the game. I had pretty much read the entire thing. This entire thick booklet of 30-something pages where I don't think there's any magic in here. But you can imagine from that the lack of having wizards in my fantasy TTRPG is not the biggest personal concern for me. I'm okay with that. I kind of follow the Star Wars thought process of being like, sometimes I think Star Wars is better if there weren't space wizards in it. And then I see stuff that they make like Andor and Rogue One and some other stuff that doesn't really focus, or Mandalorian, that doesn't really focus on Jedi. You're like, I kind of like it better. I think setting kind of works better without them. But obviously that is maybe a hot take depending on how you feel about Star Wars, I guess. Other things that I like, there is a narrative justification for the PCs in here. This is something that doesn't show up all that often in TTRPGs and really should show up more. The entire section is right up at the top. The Vagabonds, which is what they call adventurers. There have always been vagabonds in the Woodland, exiles, outcasts, strangers, oddities, idealists, rebels, criminals, free thinkers. Those who don't fit into the clearings and the paths. Those who would prefer to live in the spaces between. Most of the time, the life of a vagabond is focused on survival. They take what jobs they can when they visit clearings, often the least desirable or most difficult jobs around. You get enough food and supplies to survive. Some even resort to crime, although any who primarily subsist on stealing from other denizens are more bandits or robbers than vagabonds. So they make a distinction. So now you know that, they're people who don't live in most communities. They're kind of these freebooters that kind of hang around the edges. But they're not fully Robin Hooding out there. But along with those harsh realities, the vagabond gets something else: freedom. The social structures of clearings rarely have any hold on the vagabonds. The rulers and politicians may threaten the vagabonds into compliance using force of arms, but even then vagabonds have been hardened and sharpened by their lives. They can carry great skill in combat, and some are more than a match for even squads of soldiers or guards. So, then tells you about the power scale of a PC as well. I really wish more RPGs do that. Some do. Some tell you exactly kind of where adventurers fit into the world and how people feel about them. But lots of games, D&D included, do not. When you think about D&D and you're like, oh, how do these wildly wealthy, heavily armed, incredibly dangerous, potentially psychotic people fit into average society? How do other people interact with them or feel about them, or are they willing to sell stuff to them or not? This is going to answer that right up top, and it's going to have an even better answer for it as we get into a little bit more about the specifics of the gameplay. So this is powered by the Apocalypse engine game, which means that everything that's done is in the move system. You make moves, which are kind of like abilities. If you're in a D&D term, it's like, oh, you do a thing, or you attempt to do a specific thing. It might be helpful if I read out kind of the basic moves. Attempt a roguish feat. There's a bunch of roguish feats that you can do, which include acrobatics, blindside, counterfeit, disable device, hide, pick lock, pick pocket, sleight of hand, or sneak, kind of roguish kind of stuff. Thus the name. But in addition to attempting a roguish feat, you may figure someone out. That's sort of like an insight check, but in with this type of move, and this is similar to how a lot of moves work in Powered by the Apocalypse engine, is that when you get that, depending on how much success you get, allows you to get what they call hold, which means you kind of get like a token or like a slot that you can use for something later on. You don't have to use it right now. And when you do that, it gives you a list of questions that you can choose from. So you spend one of your hold to ask the GM one of these questions about what's going on. So in this one, you might ask, what does that character intend to do? Or what is that character really feeling about this situation, or what we're talking about? How could I get your character to blank question mark? If I need to convince them to do something, I can just straight up ask the GM, I'm reading this person, what do I think would convince them to do that thing? And they will give you an answer. Then the GM is forced to kind of give you an answer of that. Force makes it seem like it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to ask that question and have legitimate rules for how to do that stuff. Other things, in addition to attempting a roguish feat and figuring someone out, you can persuade an NPC, read a tense situation, trick an NPC, trust fate. It's basically just make a luck roll and we'll see how it goes. Wreck something, help or interfere. And then when you don't complete something, or you complete something but at a cost, there's a chance that you might have to assume a risk with that. So the risks include break something, detection, draw unwanted attention, expend resources, leave evidence, plunge into danger, get a weak result, which means you get a hard choice about exactly what you want. That's a hard choice is a mechanical term empowered by the oops. Or it takes too long. You just take a long time to do it. So it really kind of dives down and gives you this very granular understanding of like how the system runs. Powered by the Apocalypse engine is also a system in which the game master, myself in this case, we don't roll dice. Only the players roll dice, which I don't really like. I talked about this a little bit in our last review. It's like I'm not a super huge fan of those systems. I like to sit around the table with my friends, and if they're rolling dice, I want to roll dice too because it makes me feel like I'm playing the game. Otherwise, I feel like they're playing a game and I'm just kind of literally narrating it. And I don't necessarily want to do that, or that everything's up to my GM fiat, and I don't love that feeling either. So I like to have it. But the move system does a really cool thing, is that it has specific uses and options for each thing you do, which we just talked about. You get some explicit questions you can ask Game Master about a situation. It makes a really nice intro, I feel like, to TTRPGs. If you're trying to give it to somebody who's like not familiar with TTRPGs at all, and you're like, oh, here are things you can do, and when you do these things, you get to do one of these things in it. So it's very explicit about what you can do. And I feel it's really great on board for people who struggle because they feel more overwhelmed than excited about the premise of when they're told RPGs are great because you can try and do anything. And most people, myself included, are like, that's great. That sounds awesome. You mean it's like a video game, but I don't have to worry about the rules of the video game because I have a literal human being on the other side of the screen who will help me achieve the things I'm doing, or lets me do things that the game system doesn't usually handle or can't really account for. That's great. But some people, such as my partner, struggle with that, where they don't like that specific aspect of TTRPGs, where that feels very overwhelming for them, and they're like, okay, how do I know what to do if I can do anything? What do I know which is the right thing or the best thing to do? And like, there's actually certainly that stuff kind of comes from experience, but you know, there's not really a super good easy answer for that, without me, especially as a dungeon master, just telling you what to do. And I also don't want to do that because that definitely robs your like agency of the situation, which is not a thing I'm interested in doing as a game master. So it kind of puts me in a strange position. So I do appreciate that about the Powered by the Apocalypse system, and maybe you will too, or maybe some friends will too, or family members, or whoever you're trying to get involved with it, because it allows for a much easier onboarding system. Even though it's not my preferred system, I do like it because I think it does do that aspect of it very, very. Similarly, combat is pretty wishy-washy in Powered by the Apocalypse games. So if you are the sort of person who really likes crunchy D&D power gamey style gameplay, you're not going to find it here. Sorry. That's not what this game does well. This is like you're going to make some checks, and then you're going to hit a guy 3 times, and then they're going to be done. Regardless, there's no like damage for how much damage you're doing. It's a different type of system. It's not concerned with the numerical aspect of combat very much, or even the tactile positioning or anything like that. It doesn't care about that stuff. So that's kind of the basic layout of Root. So now I want to talk a little bit about the things that surprised me about the Root. The things that made me go, okay, this is new. This is different. This is something I enjoy. This is something I like. This is something I would maybe try to play Powered by the Apocalypse engine again. Which is, I think I made it clear at this point, not really a system I really like very much. I've talked about it at length in other places, but I don't... For me, the general problem I have with Powered by the Apocalypse engine is that most of the time you're going to roll in that 7 to 9 range. Which means that you're going to get the thing that you want, but it's going to come at a cost. So for me, that gameplay always feels like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Which I find to be very frustrating as a player. So that's one of the reasons I don't like it. The primary reason I don't like it. There's other stuff, but that's the primary reason. So let me tell you about what Root does that makes that maybe go, well, maybe. And one of those things, I talked about how it's nice to have the way that vagabonds have a set place in the world. Let me flip back here. And part of that comes with your reputation. It has a reputation system. So, right there at the bottom of character sheets. I know that's hard for you to see. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it. What it does is it tells you very specifically about your reputation with the people at large. So you have 3 tracks in here. You have denizens, as in the clearing you're in. Clearing is just what they call settlements, because it's a clearing in the woods. It's funny, they're woodland creatures. So denizens in the wood, the Eerie Dynasties, and the Woodland Alliance. So one of those is the old ruling house that's consolidating and coming back and trying to grab all their power. And you have the Woodland Alliance, which is all your rebels and revolutionaries. Now, what it doesn't have in here is the market site. So there's nothing in here about the Marquis. I think that is because the Marquis is an invading foreign power, so it's pretty much assumed that not a lot of people are on their side. But there is stuff that they write in the Quick-Start that makes it think like some people might see them as a good alternative to things that are happening in the wood. It might be on their side. So it's a little weird that they don't have your reputation here. I'm assuming it's not in these Quick-Start characters because the cat Marquis doesn't have anything to do with this adventure. They're in fact not important to this adventure at all. So I assume that is not why they're in here. Like I said, with Dolmenwood, I think there are parts of a character sheet you can cut out from a Quick-Start character if it's not brought up during that game or during the intro adventure. I think that's what they've done here. I think normally you would have a reputation for the market site, but right now you don't, because they're not a part of this particular adventure. But you have prestige and notoriety. So prestige is good reputation. Notoriety is bad reputation. So there is the reputation would be like that immediately tells you, and it says right in here, there are a bunch of boxes and has a track very similar to like Ironsworn, in which a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse has filtered over into Ironsworn. So if you're familiar with Ironsworn, you'll be familiar with like tracks. But the tracks are just like checkboxes. Once you hit a number of checkboxes, Plague Bearer that we covered last week does that as well. once you hit a certain number of check boxes, you start taking bonuses or penalties to rolls. So if you start getting enough notoriety, you start taking a negative to any sort of rolls you do with those people. Now, that probably wouldn't include combat rolls, because I don't think that would matter. But certainly any sort of like social rolls you do is going to make an impact. So that could be anything you can do it. That could be like trying to find clues about the adventure that's going on by talking to people. Well, if you have some notoriety, lots of people aren't going to want to talk to you. And if they do, they're not likely to give you a lot of great information. But if you have a good reputation with people, you can speak with particular people, and they are more likely to give you that. So you get a +1 to that roll, or a -1 to that roll, or a +2, or a +3, or a -2, or a -3. You get it. So I like that aspect of it, as this is a thing that you earn and keep up with as you play, because those boxes are always in flux. They're always changing as you play. And depending on how you play, they'd be like, oh, okay, you picked up some notoriety. So you're gonna, if you have prestige in that, you start marking boxes off. But the nice thing about notoriety and prestige is that they are not one track. Like, I'm looking at Quinn the Ranger here. I'm gonna show this, but it'll be very difficult for you to see. Is that he has boxes marked in notoriety and prestige for the Eerie Dynasties. So they're all at 0 right now, so doesn't have any impact. But it could be to the point where he is both well regarded by them, but also not well regarded by those people. That would be like, oh, we have this, like, we could hire this vagabond, and you know, he has a reputation for really serving the Eerie, and really, or the Eerie. He has a reputation for serving the Eerie and getting things done and being kind of a good ally for us. Thing is, he's also just a bad dude. He's well known for, like, not being a great guy. And, like, there's a chance he'll probably steal from us. He might hurt random people. So there is a chance that it could blow back on us. Or that our affiliation with this person will maybe damage our own reputation. So now, is it important for us to get this thing done? And is this the right person for the job? And so already that starts layering in all this context for having a conversation about you asking people for a quest or an adventure or work or stuff like that. And they're like, maybe, but maybe not. How difficult does this work? This guy's got a pretty good reputation for handling stuff, but there's also a chance he might, kick puppies. So, we don't necessarily want a guy walking around town punting puppies when he's wearing our colors. So, yeah, I mean, we do really need this thing to be done. So maybe, but maybe we don't give him as much money. Or maybe we make a bonus if he doesn't kick puppies. If he doesn't get caught kicking puppies. So now automatically gives you a lot more fodder for having those conversations and how you can understand how conflicted NPCs might be when they're talking to those characters based off of where their alliances might be. Whereas right now, Quinn doesn't really have anything going on with the Woodland Alliance. So if he comes across rebels or people, they'll be like, he's just some dude. He's just a normal vagabond. I don't know anything about him. Sure, I'll trade with him. Why not? So very, very different. So different people will treat you very differently, and I like that about the game. I wish more games were doing stuff like this. There's also additional harm tracks. So harm tracks we would think of in D&D as like hit points or stuff like that. So you have a harm track, but in addition to that, which is your injury track, but you also have exhaustion, just getting tired. You have depletion, which would be your supplies. So any sort of like untyped supplies like rations or general adventuring supplies. This is a thing Powered by the Apocalypse does very readily. Is like you just have untyped quantum supplies. So when you need to pull a rope from the old backpack, you can mark off a box and be like, I have a rope in the backpack. So it gives you that ability to do things like that. Which is different than being like, I have a plate armor in the backpack. No, this is for like general adventuring supplies, not for like armor and weapons. Those are different. But here's the thing where it gets really cool, is that there's another one called wear. And wear is the harm track for your equipment, like your armor and your weapons. They can also be, broken, hurt. And hurt's not really the right word for that, is it? They can be like chipped and scuffed and, put into disrepair. And if you do it enough, they will break. So there are ways to repair those things. But also, one of the things you can do is instead of taking a point of injury, you can push it off onto your armor. You can be like, my armor takes that hit, so I don't take the hit. Which is very cool. Being able to have like this sort of DR aspect, damage reduction aspect of the armor. And then being like, well, it's actually really important to get my armor healed up because it does all this stuff. And if I keep taking hits on it, it will break and then I won't have my armor anymore. And same thing for your weapons. Most of the weapons in here have like 1 to 3 boxes of wear. So if you have a dagger, that's usually a 1-box weapon. If that thing takes any wear, it's essentially broken. So you're pretty much always buying new daggers. Whereas something like chainmail has 3 boxes on it, so you could use it. And if you really needed to, you could take 3 hits on the chainmail and not take any injury. But it also helps that you have a PC in the party, which is Keely the Tinker, who's a little beaver. And she has the ability to repair some stuff as a tinker. So it's cool to have somebody in your party that has those skills as well. Because I like having gear that you kind of constantly need to do a little bit of upkeep. I don't want to do like a ton of upkeep, but I want to do like every once in a while be like, oh yeah, I need to do some upkeep on that, or I need to pay out some money to get the smith to resharpen my sword. Reforge, that would be a totally different thing. Like that. And I also want to talk about exhaustion. So exhaustion is a very fun concept. So exhaustion is, well, you know what happens when you get exhausted. Same thing, is like you're just basically unable to function. But there is something that each one of these characters, and let's pick a different one. I'm looking at Quinn's face, so let's get a different one. Not Scratch. We kind of looked at Nimble already. Yeah, let's use Xander the Vagrant. He's a little possum. So with your exhaustion, you can actually clear your exhaustion track yourself by following your character's nature, which is kind of like their background drive. No, it's not their drive, because drive's very specific. So each character en route has a nature in it. And that nature is something they do that is likely to get them in trouble. Especially if it doesn't go well. But if you at least attempt to do that thing, if you attempt to follow your nature, you get to clear your entire exhaustion track. So you can freewheel spend exhaustion as much as you want, knowing that you can always clear it. But in doing so, when you clear stuff, it might also get you in trouble if you don't do a very good job of it. So Xander the Vagrant. His nature is Hustler. Clear your exhaustion track when you spring a complicated con on a dangerous mark. So you have to run a con, like a confidence scheme, on somebody. But it can't just be anybody. It has to be a dangerous person. Somebody who can do something to you if it doesn't go well. Now remember, way back here in the front, it said that frickin' NPC, that's a move you make. So you can attempt to do that. You roll with cunning. And Xander's cunning is +1, so it gets a +1 to that roll. On a hit, they take the bait and do whatever you want. On a 7 through 9, they can instead choose one. They hesitate, you shake their confidence or weaken their morale. They stumble, you gain a critical opportunity. They overreact, you take a +1 forward against them. So you can get either one of those, but that doesn't really resolve the thing that you're doing. But if you're able to at least do that much, you get to clear... If you at least attempt it, you get to clear your exhaustion track, which is really fun. It gives this a reason for players to make unoptimized decisions about what their player characters would do. And that's just one of them. Let's look at some other drives. I really like Keely. So Keely is a dissident. Let's put it that way. She for a long time has been preaching dissent in the Glade in Pelnicky. Enough that I think she got cast out from it by the mayor. Oh nope, I'm thinking of the wrong person. Oh no, that's the right one. So your nature, radical. Clear your exhaustion track when you espouse dangerous ideas to the wrong audience. So you have to take somebody who is, let's say there's people who don't really like Healy. Would probably be, I mean, the people who like her the least would be the Eerie Dynasty. The Eerie Dynasty. For obvious reasons. So you would need to espouse dissent to somebody, maybe not specifically of the dynasties, but somebody related to the dynasty. So if you did that to one of the other NPCs who's tied to them, that might work. But as long as there would be, that person would be the wrong audience for that. But I like that aspect. Other things that I like about it, NPCs have morale. It's nice to have it baked into the system. Straight up. And I think it's the first time they get hit, and then when like 50% of their number are reduced, they check for morale. And I think maybe when they're the last person, they check again for morale. So you're trying to end combat quicker. Usually by surrendering or running away. And the last thing that I really like about here, because I know I'm going long in the tooth about this, is the trade aspect. Because your trade is directly tied to your reputation. So your reputation will give you the ability to either have a bonus or a penalty when you're rolling to make a trade, to trade off items. It also does a very fun thing. So Root is not concerned with like individual gold pieces, but instead you get things that are of a value, just like the tracks. And you can have something that's 1 box of value all the way up to 5 boxes of value. And that can include a pouch of gold coins, which might just be gold coins worth 1 box of value. But you might find like a golden scepter that's worth 5 on the very, very far end. Now, the cool thing about this is in addition to that, in addition to reputation, so then in the group you might need to decide who can actually do the trading here, is that let's say that you have that golden scepter and you're trying to buy supplies, and let's say the amount of supplies you're trying to buy is 2 boxes worth, 2 value worth, and you have the scepter that's worth 5, and it just straight up says in the game, they don't make change. So if you pay for it with the 5 value scepter, you don't get 3 value gold coins back. You just lose the 3 value. So you want to make sure that you find things that are worth what you're paying for, because you're never going to get change back from it. But also it kind of like encourages you to buy more stuff. And consider about like what you'll take with you. Like, of course, the 5 value thing, the higher value thing will always be more worthwhile for you to pick up as like treasure or loot or payment or whatever. But the fact that you can't divide it is like, is it better to have 1 5-box item or 3 1-box items of value? And you'll have to think about things that you pay for, and supplies, and getting repairs done. How much does that cost? Which is, if I remember correctly, is kind of a 1-to-1 value. If you need to have 1 box repaired of your sword, then that is 1 box of value that you need to pay. Well, obviously I don't want to pay with this big scepter, get that done. So I would rather have the 1 box of value gold coin pouch. Be like, here you go, please repair my sword. So I like all that stuff really about it. You'd be surprised. Yeah, Dolmenwood for sure has morale. All OSR stuff's going to have morale in it. If it's playing by the OSR rules, everything will have morale in it. And can confirm Dolmenwood has morale in it. Absolutely it does. I didn't talk about it because it's very OSR, so I assume And I think it's a worthwhile assumption if you're going in to play an OSR game and you're familiar with OSR at all, you know that those systems have morale in them. And, well, we talked about it because it's at the end of each round of combat you report. It's part of the thing that you do. So, that's all the stuff that I like. Now, I will say, if you're a brand new game master, or maybe you've only run D&D, like contemporary D&D, or you might be like a GM game master who does a bunch of prep for your sessions, you might struggle to run some of these route adventures, which is what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about the actual adventures here. Let me get to the front of the event. And we'll go a little bit into it. So, and this is not something about route specifically, this is a Powered by the Apocalypse thing in general. Is that the rules and adventure specifics tend to be really, let's say, flexible. And they rely on a lot of interpretation and at-the-table choices you'll need to make as a game master. They are very heavily focused on collaborative play. And with the players at the table having input about how the story unfolds. If you go and look at things like Dungeon World, they talk about like how you build out the world, and often you do that. During sessions, you will ask questions of the players, and the players will create new stuff in the world. I do not know whether Root does that or not. It's only given us a one-shot adventure, so we don't know what multi-session play looks like, but I assume that it will be very similar because it cleaves very closely to Carve by the Apocalypse. So I think it will probably have quite a bit of that. So, Hellnicky Glade, as an adventure, really is a cementing of that idea. It's a very small sandbox. It's like a settlement, and we're talking like a village settlement. We're not talking like a big city. It is an event-based adventure. So you're not going to a dungeon and delving it. Everything that's happening is happening in the glade. Technically, I guess you could go outside of the glade, but we're not giving any indication as to anything happening outside of it. The closest is something happening below it, which is a location you can get to. Called the Underground Stream, which you would hear about as you go through the adventure. And you may go to all the locations, you may not go to all the locations. Kind of depends on things. But it's got a lot of detail in it. Here, let me back up a little. Here's the adventure. It's a whole lot of text. Ending right here. So it's a lot of paragraphs of text. So one of the things you might have noticed is that it lacks a map. So there are locations here, and you do go to locations within the settlement, but there's no indication as to where spatially they're arranged, which could be important for this adventure, because the primary thing that's going on in this adventure is you're investigating somebody's death. So when you're trying to figure out where people were at what times, it's very investigator, very much more like a Call of Cthulhu style adventure, or those types of skill-based game adventures where it's not like you go in a dungeon and you do the thing. It's more like, here's a situation of stuff that's happening. Have at it. And so you're trying to figure out like time frames and who was where at what time doing what, and who has an alibi for that, and are they lying about that? Are they telling the truth? Do they have any evidence in the room of things that happened? Can we, examine the body and blah, 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 blah. So some of that would be nice to have a map. We don't get one of those. So if you want one, you're going to have to make one and determine where these things are arranged. Because pretty much the only thing that we know that's different is that things for the Airy are up in the treetops. Everything else is on the forest floor. But it does also lack basically an outline for the adventure. After we get through... I can find it real quick. This one. This is the opening page. So after you read these two paragraphs of text, you're off to the races. That's all the outline you get for this adventure, really, as to what's going to happen when and that kind of information. You're not going to get a lot. So after that, you know, your players are going to start running around doing all sorts of weird stuff, and you're going to have to you'll be flipping through these pages trying to figure out who they're talking to and where they're at and anything like that. So you don't have a time frame, you don't have an outline or anything like that. Once you get through that intro paragraph, it's wild, wild west out there. This can be really difficult, both as a GM if you're not prepared or you haven't had a lot of experience running those kind of things. But especially if you don't have players who take a lot of proactive action. So if you have players who don't do much without being prompted to do things, which is pretty much how I would say contemporary D&D adventures are structured, where it's just the player characters are there and things just kind of happen at them. And they're not as often like the characters are motivated to go do adventuring on their own often. If you walk into this and you have players who are used to that type of gameplay, there's gonna be a lot of minutes of you guys kind of staring at the table, kind of going, so we I don't know what to do. You're gonna have those kinds of situations happen. And which is fine. You just kind of need to tell them, like, hey, look at your character sheets. There's a number of people that you know within the glade. So think about people you might want to talk to that you already have relationships with. You guys are just getting back to the glade for the first time, so you might want to check in with people that you haven't talked to. There might be some people that have some news about things that are going on. So you do kind of have to give them a little push along the way to get them hopefully kick-started, so they'll once the game gets running, that it'll start running upon its own energy, its own inertia. But trying to get it kick-started can be a little difficult. And probably what I would say is kind of the biggest issue with this adventure. And let me preface this by saying I like the adventure. I think the adventure is really good. I think it's very, very specific. You have a lot of multiple situations that are developing simultaneously with the primary conflict of the adventure, which is the death investigation. Somebody died, and we believe there's been a murder. So that is primarily what's going on, but you have all this other stuff that's happening in the background of that the player characters will stumble across as they go through that, which all kind of tie into maybe motivations for potential murder. But without some sort of definitive timeline of events, like usually if you were playing a Call of Cthulhu game or something like that, they would give you a timeline of events and be like, this is what happens at this timeline. And it's like, if the characters don't do stuff, this is kind of what goes on. And this, they do some of that in here, but it's kind of split up in different areas. Like right here, it says, if the vagabonds never came to the glade, then the issue would resolve itself explosively and blah, blah, blah. It kind of tells you stuff if they didn't get involved. But it doesn't tell you what actually happened. Just what would happen if the player characters don't do anything, which is slightly different. So, I'm going to put just a very basic spoiler warning real quick. It's going to be one sentence, so spoiler warning. Is it? Just look away for a second, and then come back. So, here's a spoiler. There's no predetermined murderer. There's 9 pages of adventure here that you get as a GM. And none of it tells you who the murderer is. In fact, it tells you you're going to have to figure out who the murderer is. And so, what you do is you get a photograph in time of what Pelnicky Glade is like. So it's captured in a moment of time. This is what the situation is right now. The moment after you read those 2 intro paragraphs, you're off to the races. Whatever they do drastically changes the future. This is your point of I don't know, demarcation. This is like the moment where things change because the vagabonds arrive. So you only get the information about like what they would do otherwise. So what it means is that you as the GM, you still have to create like a lot of the definitive aspects of the adventure. And if you're a high prep DM, you're going to do that beforehand. So you still basically need to prep an adventure. You have 9 pages of like setting, and you still kind of actually have to prep the adventure. Or you have to fly completely by the seat of your pants and improvise at the table. So if you're a high improv GM, that probably sounds great. If you are a high prep GM, you're like, the entire reason that I run an adventure like this is because I didn't have time to prep my own adventure, or I didn't want to prep my own adventure, or I didn't feel comfortable about it. Whatever my reason is that I'm using this because I did not want to do this other thing. And you're telling me that I need to do this other thing for the adventure I got. So I think that's a really big ask of a GM, and it very much kind of flies in the face of running a published adventure when you still kind of have to create most of it. So what it does is, to give you kind of like an analogy for a D&D kind of crowd, is that it's sort of like if they gave you a paint by number dungeon. And they're like, cool, here's the bad guy in it, here's the situation that's going on in the dungeon, here's what the factions are like, here are the different monster groupings that are in it, here's the different traps that can be in there, here's some of the different treasures, and here's a map. I have one out. Here's a map. You fill it in. You're like, that's great, but you basically told me to make a dungeon. I can already do that. I don't need your help for that. So maybe that's a little bit of a personal thing, maybe, because usually when I'm running adventures, I like to create my own adventures. That's half the fun for me. I enjoy that as prep. I like to make adventures. I like to make encounter stuff. I like to prep for D&D. I'm a weirdo, apparently. Lots of people don't like to prep for D&D. I love prepping for D&D. I think it's tons of fun. It's this cool other aspect of the game that I get to do that nobody else gets to do. Very fun. I think it's useful for like quickening prep, like obviously trying to turn this into an adventure, these 9 pages into an adventure is a lot easier than having to make an adventure and also create the 9 pages of setting. But I think for personally, it's like if I'm going to put that much effort in, I'll probably just have time to just do it all myself. And I probably prefer to do that because I'm going to be able to remember that much, much easier than trying to read somebody else's words and also do my prep of a session. So I think Pelnicky Glade and Root in general is a dense like web of relationships and situations. That's how the game plays. It's kind of what it's going for. Be like, oh, these people are related to these people, and these people are related to these people, and they have this kind of relationship, and these people have this kind of relationship, but they don't like those people over there. And that includes one of your fellow party members who's also attached to these characters, NPCs over here. And that's kind of a loggerhead, and how you're going to deal with that situation. And how do you find whatever you think is the most amenable solution to whatever the problem is that's happening here, or the situation, that you can get kind of the best good out of it, or at least the most lucrative good out of it for you as a PC. So I like it a lot. I like this low, no magic, social and political gameplay kind of TTRPG stuff. All you gotta do is look at my current solo adventure series that we've been doing, a River Apart. Hey, low magic, heavy politics going on, as well as some like hex crawling aspects of it, at least for right now, and trying to figure out how do I work traditional D&D style adventure into a setting like that or a campaign like that. So campaigns like this can be really thinky, they can be really tedious. They involve a lot of RP and snooping around and investigation. There's often not a ton of dice rolling, and even fewer instances of those dice rolling being like combats that involve fantastic monsters or fabulously magic loot. So if that's the kind of stuff that you're looking for, which is a very D&D kind of style, traditional D&D style kind of game, you're probably not going to find it here. So I know that I play with people who I'm like, this is just not, this would probably not be for them. But I also play with some people that I think like, oh yeah, they'd probably actually really enjoy this. In the same way that I would probably really enjoy it. In the same way that I play in a campaign that already has a lot of political stuff in it. And run a campaign that also has a lot of political stuff that's going on. The one that I run is at a much smaller level, a lot closer to kind of this level, Pelnicki Glades level. Whereas the one that I play in is more like, well, we're higher level too, but it's more like, oh, nations are involved and we're doing international diplomacy and stuff like that, and drafting articles of like an alliance constitution and all sorts of crazy stuff like that, and making like large scale battle plans, and very different style of campaign than I think most D&D campaigns. There is one thing that I want to say in here that we haven't touched on at all, because like my reasons about it is that it does not feel particularly important. So you have an important character in here called the Silent Paw. What is the Silent Paw? So, see if he's got information. Probably not. Not under important residence. That's all the information you're gonna give me? So Pelnicki Glade has perhaps the Silent Paw there. And the Silent Paw is kind of like a well-known kind of assassin thief, kind of mysterious figure. And one of the PCs is related to the Silent Paw. But I do have to say that the Silent Paw feels like a late edition, like it's this real vestigial kind of thing that's they just added at the last. The Silent Paw doesn't really fit with anything else that's going on in the adventure. My assumption is Scratch, who is the PC, who is this little guy right here, this little cat with a pumpkin lantern, was a late addition to the player character roster. Because I think there's 6 player characters, so it feels like they had 5, and then they were like, let's throw one more in. Like maybe they had an extra page or something, and they're like, well, let's just put another PC in or something like that. And so they did that. And I feel like that character was already a late addition, because really their only tie to Pelnicki, for the most part, is the Silent Paw, who already isn't really tied to the adventure. So I feel like they were like, all right, we need to make this character. Well, we've already kind of written the scenario, so there's not really anything to tie them to, because they have a lot of overlap with a couple of the other characters, Keely and Nimble, which is the raccoon thief, and the beaver tinkerer. They kind of fulfill that same like radical and thievery kind of thing going on that Scratch kind of falls into. And so it feels like they just needed some reason for this character to be involved, and that they were like, well, the Silent Paw, who's not really tied to anything. So it just feels kind of like flimsy and unimportant to what's going on in the adventure. So it just feels really weird. Oh, the thing we talked about that's in our solo RPG that's in here is the name of the nobles who run Pelnicki are the Ghost. If you guys watch the solo RPG that I do, we went to the Priory of the Ghost Priory. It was very funny, which both named after the same bird. So it was very funny to be like, oh, reading this after I had made just before that made the Priory, being like, oh, that's weird. Weird that they also pulled this. But sure, you know, I'm just looking for interesting bird names, and here we go. Obviously, they're going to need a lot with a place like the Eyrie. For sure. Oh, you feel like bears are the trolls and deer are the spirits of the setting. Yeah, because then you have like the larger woodland creatures, like bears, who are just like big trouble if you run into them. And that way it feels a lot like Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard's kind of similar like that, where they're like, oh, and then there's also big nasty stuff that's out there too that you just don't want to run into. Yeah, I think you're right. Awesome, Billy. I think so. I think I would concur with that. The bears are kind of like the trolls, and the deers are kind of like the spirits of the game. Now, the deers aren't really mentioned in this Quick-Start. I will say that. They do have a mention, a very slight mention of bears. I think they throw it under like... This is a good encapsulation of what I'm talking about for like the GM resources. That. Right there. Conflict. Like right before. NPCs and harm. So, they kind of give you this idea that this one page, by the way, is really, really great GM advice. Like a great GM toolbox for running this game. It's very solid. But does highlight the issue where it's like, we're going to give you some stuff, and then you get to make stuff with that stuff. It kind of tells you, create an NPC, you can do like 1 to 5 boxes and stuff. And then kind of gives you, oh, if you want to treat NPCs as mobs, which I feel like should be later on the page, not right there. 5 to 10 average denizens are a small mob, where they get 3 boxes of harm, and they deal double damage. 10 to 20 are a medium mob with 5 boxes of harm, and 3 times the normal damage. And then 20 plus average denizens are a large mob, 7 boxes of each harm, and they deal 4 times normal damage. That's important because there's a way that this adventure goes where it just becomes a full-out armed conflict that happens in the middle of the glade. Now, ideally, you don't want that to happen. Ideally, you're probably trying to stop that from happening, but there is a chance that it does just break out into like an actual, not probably battle level, but definitely skirmish level encounter between different factions that are vying for control of Pelnicky Glade. They give you a list of names, they tell you some species, and the interesting thing about Root is that the species don't matter. They don't do anything mechanically, so you can be whatever you want. You can be a badger, beaver, blue jay, cat, fox, hawk, lizard, mouse, possum, otter, owl, rabbit, raccoon, squirrel, or wolf, or probably any other sort of like woodland creature you could think of, if you wanted. Then they have some sample drives, which are the things that they want. Each of your PCs get drives too. Your drives are the things that you use. Once you accomplish drives, you get the ability to level up. That's very powered by the Apocalypse thing. So instead of being like you get experience points, it's like I'm trying to do this one thing. And you have 2 drives at one time. If I do one of those drives, then I get to level up, which means you get like piecemeal powers, a little bit more like a skill-based system than a class-based system. And then tells a little bit about your harm tracks. Under harm tracks, they're like, oh, if you want to make a standard NPC, this is what they look like, or a brute or a bruiser, this is what they look like. A leader, it's not a fighter, looks more like this. A lieutenant looks like this. And then, like I said at the end, as we were talking about earlier, a bear. They give you stats for a bear. Is there a bear in this adventure? No, there's not. It's interesting. And the NPC attacks. So they give you like this cool toolbox to be like, if you need to build bad guys real quick, just like mook bad guys or whatever, here's how you do that. And it's the page right before you go into the adventure. It's super useful, but very much like everything, like the adventure itself, it's kind of like, here is a toolkit, and then you're going to kind of make the adventure as you go, based off of what the players and their characters do in the setting. So very, very different style of play than doing something like a dungeon delve. Very, very different. So if you're not prepared for that, it's gonna be a bit of a hurdle. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do it. I think this is a good adventure. I think this is a really fun adventure. And if you've never played a style of game like this, an adventure like this, where you're like, it's kind of up to you to figure out what's going to happen. If not, a bunch of people are going to die. And the further you go in the adventure, the more apparent that will become. And generally, you have friends and family members and stuff in this community, and you're like, well, obviously I don't want them to die, so let's see if I can do something about that as sort of motivation. What you do want to do is try to, as the GM, is front load that motivation very much early on in the adventure as you're running it. Because you don't want to wait to be like, oh, by the way, here's a motivation for adventure in the last like hour of you playing a one-shot. You want to be at the very front. So really the first time they start talking to these NPCs that they're all tied to, and each person's tied to different NPCs in different places, you should make it really apparent like their feelings about what's going on and what they think could happen. Very, very early. So, summation. How I feel about this overall. How do I feel about Root? Well, the art's fantastic. Love the art. And why am I showing this? We can just look at the actual art. You don't have to look at my a reflected glossy page of it. We can just look at the actual art. There's the actual art. So it's it seems like a lot of fun. The art's really neat. I do think that the art and its cutesy demeanor, just like the board game has this problem too, is that it kind of undercuts how serious the game is. Both of the games are, Root and the board game. Is because they're really, really serious, and I think having the cute woodland creatures kind of undercuts it. Because this is definitely not a game that's made for children. Not because there's like a bunch of gore or anything like that, or terrible, like, not like Plague Bear where it's like, oh, you got like this terrible scar and you got like your hand, part of your hand cut off, and you don't have like body horror and all sorts of like strange creatures and stuff like that. Like, you don't have any of that, or like abominations or cosmic horror or whatever. It's not anything. It's just because this is not a game for children, because politics is pretty boring to kids. They do not care. It's a bunch of people standing around talking. Now, also, that's an RPG. So, if you have kids that are interested in sitting around talking, as in playing a TTRPG, maybe they'll be interested in it. But probably not. They'll probably gonna want to see and kill, like, big monsters and rescue dragons from princesses and do that kind of stuff. Like, high adventure stuff. They're probably less likely to be like, oh, let's care what happens about this random settlement in the middle of the woods before it tears itself apart. They're probably not going to be that interested in it unless there's some sort of monster that's doing it. Root is by far the most likely game I've come across that makes me want to try to play Powered by the Apocalypse games again. Again, like I do play Ironsworn as like a solo game occasionally. So it's not like I'm not never play those games, but I really don't go out of my way to play them, except for Ironsworn, just because it's one of the easiest to pick up and play solo RPGs for what I'm trying to do, and I like the Nordic setting of it. I'm gonna hope that most of my lackluster experience with Powered by the Apocalypse has a lot to deal with that Dungeon Master or Game Master who was running it, and I would say not the players. I think we had a pretty good group of players. Always a gamble when you're playing like a random online game, but we had people come in and out of the game who were interesting. But once we hit a core group of players, the group was really good. It was the DM or Game Master that I think was probably, like I said, they were trying to use Powered by the Apocalypse engine to run a D&D style game, dungeon crawl game, and man, those things did not work well together, like at all. The irony is that running something like Root and then doing something like a West Marches campaign, I think that Root would be a fabulous way to run a West Marches style of game. You have all these people that all have reputations with different types of factions, all these different places they could run around to and deal with out in the woodlands, all these other external threats that are happening. Like, I think that would be a really great way to run West Marches campaign. Especially if you're the sort of person who doesn't mind improvising a lot of adventure as it comes up, because Carve by the Apocalypse tends to do a lot of that. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff that could be done with them. And it's the one that's most likely to make me consider playing Powered by the Apocalypse in more than a one-shot. Certainly, would I run this? Yeah, I think so. I think I'm a little bit of a higher prep DM, so I'd really kind of sit down. I'd want to know before we started playing the spoiler. I'd want to know that information. And this isn't going to tell me that, so I'm going to have to sit down and figure that out. And probably make some notes of myself out of those 9 pages, condense it down to probably like a page, just so I can quick reference stuff. So I think that I would do it, but it is the one that makes me be like, I would be interested in maybe playing a longer form adventure. I'm not going to commit to a campaign, but certainly a 2-shot. I'm talking about like maybe if we played like 7 sessions or something, have a longer form adventure of something we're trying to do. I'd be down for that, I feel like. And at that point, I'd be like, oh, I want to keep playing this game. Or I'd be like, that was nice, but I can only eat hamburgers so many times in a row before I want something else. Or else I won't want to eat hamburgers anymore forever. The same sort of thing. If you're looking for alternatives to root, flip this back real quick. From Magpie Games, the publisher, you can check out Avatar: The Last Airbender game. I'm not going to dig it out. It's in this basket next to me. It is interesting. It's been a minute since I've looked at it, so the mechanics are... I think it might be a D100 system. Can't remember off the top of my head. That might be wrong. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it again. But if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for something from the same publisher, there you go. If you're interested in the political nature of Root, there are lots of RPGs. You are spoiled for choice. You have the actual Game of Thrones licensed RPG, the Blue Rose RPG from Green Ronin, which is very similar. Probably because I think Game of Thrones RPG actually is an age system RPG, so they're going to be using the same framework, same system. You could also play something else like Pendragon or Ars Magica if you're wanting to do like longer dynasty play. If you want to be like the Eyrie Dynasty or a house within the Eyrie Dynasty or Game of Thrones style, where you are a house and you're playing multiple people in that house through generations. Especially in something like Pendragon, where combat is ultra deadly. Where anytime you get into combat, there's a high likelihood that you will be gravely injured or killed. Or you might be fine. It truly is a roll of the dice. If you're looking for other places that, like I said about Pelnicky Glade, where it seems like it's a location that's locked or frozen in time at a very specific time. Frozen, locked in a specific time. There, we'll say it correctly. I would say consider Harnworld. That's a much bigger setting. Very cool setting. And I have not done too much with Harn, but I like it. It's a little bit more historical, and that's rough to say with an RPG, but it's a little bit more low fantasy, trying to be a little bit more realistic kind of style. So if you're interested in something like that, with a whole bunch of... Harn's been out for what, like 20, 25 years, something like that? So there's a lot of stuff about Harn. It's its own sort of big sandbox setting. And the cool thing that's about Harn is, unlike something like Forgotten Realms and Faerun, or pretty much any other setting where lore keeps piling on top of itself again and again and again. And so then you have to be like, you have to figure out what time period you're playing in. Harnworld is just that one thing. This day, in this year, this is the state of Harnworld as it is. Everything that happens from that moment forward is your campaign and not canon to the world. So you have a moment, and it's like what everything was at the beginning of something like Game of Thrones. Except instead, imagine that Game of Thrones ended with Baratheon's death, or started with Baratheon's death. Which it kind of does, but very close to it. But imagine that's the point. So that's the watershed moment, and then whatever happens next is completely up to your campaign, and original to your campaign. If you're looking for other fuzzy creature RPGs, we talked about Dungeons and Kittens already. So go check out that video for my thoughts and other recommendations, because I talk about other fuzzy animal RPGs in that are probably a little bit more kid-friendly if you're looking for that, compared to Root. But yeah, that is my review of Root and Dolmenwood. My first impressions, kind of looking at it, guys. Dolmenwood, liked it, very much OSR with a fairy tale feel to it. That should tell you everything you want to know. If you want that grim Hans Christian Andersen kind of feel with OSR gameplay, that's for you. If you are interested in more narrative gameplay and improvised kind of game stuff, and you like highly political stuff, Root's probably you. I'm in the Root camp for right now and interested in taking a look at it more. But hey, that was everything we wanted to do. We hit pretty much the stream length that I was looking for. I had some other stuff we could do, but we'll hold that off for next time. We usually do streams on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, usually on Saturday, and including this upcoming Saturday, we should be doing our solo RPG session, so drop in if you want to see more of that political kind of gameplay. We're going to do a River Apart. It is a solo D&D 5e 5.5. It's a mix of both, I guess, at this point. Gameplay, if you want to see that, it is about a young halfling who has just become noble. He is being hunted by political wolves. He is trying to establish his fiefdom and do a little bit of light imperialism as he tries to literally go past their borders and take over other people's land. It's been a lot of fun. We've had people picked up and carried off by giant eagles already. We've had somebody get into a lot of gambling debt very quickly and then get out of it very quickly. We've had all sorts of crazy stuff happen in that campaign. I can't wait to see what happens next. In fact, we're starting off immediately with combat, interrupting our long rest when we pick that up on Saturday. It'll be fun. Otherwise, we talk about D&D and other TTRPG stuff, so if you like this content, give it a like. If you want to see more of it, please feel free to go give a follow or subscribe if you're over on YouTube. We stream on both Twitch or YouTube, so it's whichever one you like. You can see other stuff down in the description, some playlists and all that stuff. You want to get caught up with A River Apart, because we're going into session 12. Including if you want to look at the early of it and see how I built out the setting and do all that stuff. We did all of that in stream as well, so feel free to check that out. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me, guys. This is always fun, and I'll see you guys real soon. All right, bye-bye.